Welcome to Dweller of the Dark. We are a channel honoring the yellowed and blackened bones of many prominent authors. We will be digging up several obscure, strange, and forgotten authors who influenced many of the great horror, science fiction, and fantasy writers today. More tales of the horrifying, obscure, strange, and forgotten are climbing out of the tombs. Subscribe, comment, like, donate, or I'll send Thaddeus Forge to steal your heathen soul. Unknown horror masters, send us ghoulish delights for the Skull and Bones collection. Your pound of writer's flesh will continue to feed our ghouls for now. Books, websites, podcasts, in the links below. Children of Horror, Legion of Ghouls. Tonight, we dedicate our most dreadful horror chapter to the Hell's Forge series, In the Beginning, to Super Ghouls, ARW, CWB, Sharky Sharkums, and Thomas Swafford. Thanks for the ravenous support. Devilishly devoted to horror, may your souls always be. Hell's Forge, In the Beginning. 1. Sometimes an Appalachian story is so humanistic, so brutal and horrific, that its very existence is terrifying. We can't believe such a tale has been allowed to fester and erupt like a malignant rotting boil. Yarns like the one I'm about to spin are the hideous tales whispered in the shadows and taken to the grave. But sometimes the tale, like the undead, rise up to haunt us again and again for all eternity. And some of us have just meager years left to be terrified in each of our own haunted worlds. Alas, cold in the ground, with the Conqueror Worm our only friend, we may continue to be tormented by the ghost or demons of our past. But on the latter, about the other side, who really knows? One tale in particular has made many a mountain man shudder and a chill run up their spine. Usually, it's in the fall, when the burnished leaves have become crisped and sere. But the evil on Cauldron Mountain ain't too picky about the seasons when it wants a soul. That's especially true when the storm clouds rise, the lightning arcs in a blaze of red and purple, and a deluge of silver rain washes over the mountain and the charred facade of Hell's Forge. Well, what is Hell's Forge, you may ask? Who owns such a terrifying looking place on that forested, dangerous mountain? Hell's Forge was built by Thaddeus Forge after the poor Appalachian boy came into wealth as a musician in one of those devilish cities in the north. Nightmarish, twisted events that happened, damn you, corrupted his soul and demanded he build the hellish monstrosity. But Lucifer's machinations didn't end with the building of the world's most terrifying house. No, the devil one-upped himself, molding and shaping Thaddeus Forge into his image at the end of his human life. That's right, I said human life. What haunts Cauldron Mountain now is no longer a man, and the latter is what made him that legend I mentioned earlier. But once, he had been a child of God. He'd been a creature of the divine, with a heart as golden as a shimmering stream in a midday sun. He walked unsteadily, as if his long legs were the stilts of a scarecrow. He would stare on a butterfly wide-eyed, with a child's innocence, though his childhood had many summers past. A swarm of twinkling yellow fireflies would have him giddy for days. A hopping rabbit made him hop around, with the critter imitating it and all manner of wildlife, like a modern Tarzan. And always to the laughs and kisses of his beloved Ruby. But Thad was no simpleton. His mind flowed endlessly on theories, concepts, and ideas. He spoke of some of these to a curly, brown-haired boy with hazel eyes. This buffoon was his best friend, Cletus Bartholomew. Cletus, you see the way Cauldron Mountain holds the electricity sometimes. I think there's something in the rocks that draws it there. This fellow I'm reading, Max Planck, says matter and light and energy have correlations. Heck, he even wrote some math equations on it. I just would have to figure out the squiggly lines in them.
Well, you go ahead and do that, Moon Doctor. You conjure them spells.
Cletus slugged his best friend and walked to the edge of the cliff. They had perched to look on the crystalline view of Lake Lanier that rippled up to the shores of Cauldron Mountain. The slightly pudgy boy took a deep breath and almost swooned as he edged close to the leap-off point of the cliff. Thad knew Cletus hated heights, and this cliff edge always gave him the jitters. Sighing and wiping sweat from his brow, he turned back.
How are we swimming today?
Cletus had glanced, with his heart racing, shifting his feet inch by inch. He narrowed his eyes and spied timidly down to the blue waters below. He gulped, hoping Thad hadn't heard him. If he did, he knew his scarecrow of a friend would tease him for sure. A shadow flew past him. Cletus fell back near the outcrop cliff's edge, gripping a pine sapling for dear life. He watched the beanpole blur jump off the granite cliff into the icy blue waters below with a crashing splash. Cletus realized Thad had launched himself fearlessly out into the cool waters of Lake Lanier. Huffing under his breath, Cletus screamed in outrage down to his best friend.
You take too many chances with your life, Thaddeus Forge. You know, you only have one of them.
He heard splashing and Thad's heartful laughter in the clear, cool waters. Come on in, cowboy. The water is freezing cold, Cletus. Cletus moved back from the cliff's edge and waddled and scrambled back to a nearby boulder. His plan was to waddle and scramble down to the water's edge of the lake. A red-haired girl with green eyes, freckled tan skin, slight curves walked up to Cletus with a slight limp. Ruby St. Clair. One of these days, that boy is going to get us all killed. She shrugged and hobbled herself off the cliff into the chilled blue waters of Lake Lanier. A boy, not much older than Cletus, with a rugged, muscular build, moved up to him. The teenager with chestnut hair and brown eyes shrugged at Cletus, puzzled. Hey, Cletus, are you going to jump too? 3 other teens, 2 identical twin boys with brilliant blonde hair, and an older girl with raven hair awaited his reply. Cletus pointed with a shaky hand to the granite outcrop.
Maybe another time. My daddy told me to never jump off the outcrop into Lake Lanier. He said, "You're just scared as always, Cletus. Fraidy cat." The 2 blonde-haired boys laughed and ran and jumped off the cliff into the lake's chilled waters, making 2 cannonball splashes simultaneously. The brown-haired boy waved at Cletus and followed suit. He and his friends that summer were oblivious to real evil. They had yet to feel the plague of that kind of black pain which struck out of nowhere, leaving chaos in its wake. Hadn't hate and envy and violence always swarmed humanity like buzzing flies? The depravity, the violence,
and the degradation that always finds a way to snake into a good community and poison it. Those men and women that have no light shining in their black souls. Creatures hell-bent to destroy while lurking in the shadows of endless night. Yes, Dad believed in monsters long before he became one. To him, they were the clawed beasts that needed their daily pound of flesh and gallons of blood from the endless wars they created for tribute or profit. They were the lurking maniacs that forced families to send their sons, fathers, and friends off to die in endless wars to line their pockets. Cletus would point to a newspaper that would show a brave fighting man, a hero, and boast stupidly,
I want to fight in a war like this guy. You know, I'm a crack shot with a rifle. I can plink a squirrel from 50 feet away. I'll take out our enemies and show the world what an Appalachian man is made of.
More likely, Cletus Bartholomew, you'd shame us all and trip in the first charge. Bayoneting yourself, you'd probably accidentally shoot your own men. You'd be the first soldier given a Purple Heart and their discharge for utter stupidity. Dad would laugh and tussle the baseball cap on Cletus's head. Dad had been the best and brightest friend to all who knew him. He had always been above the foolishness, violence, and depravity of mankind. He chose love, the fleeting gift, over such dreadful murderous ideology spouted by those who never go to war. Dad chose not to pay attention to the endless wars that even plagued our time out in the roaring 1920s. He would rather quote Lord Byron or Edgar Allan Poe out in the forest to his ailing leprous mother. He'd rather stand tall, not in a military formation, to enact plays based on Ambrose Bierce with me and my brother John to anyone who would watch and laugh. Oh, how his fall from grace broke all our hearts. When Dad fell to the darkness, the world seemed to shine a little darker and a lot colder. In the days before the unspeakable tragedy killed the light in Thad, Dad was grounded on the path of peace. But if ever the thought of retaliation to violence or faltering by not turning the other cheek came into his head, his beloved fiancée, Ruby Sinclair, would be there to guide him back to the path of the righteous, like the morning star. Ruby would coax and plead in no uncertain terms. Dad, you could easily whip them in a fight, and they know it. But you would lose something if you did. I know. You would drop me on the spot for not following the good book. I ain't no fool, Ruby. Dad would clench his teeth and hands trying to control the rage inside him. Most of the time, what set him off would be the rich boys of the town, banker's sons Melvin and Dewey Dwyer, the lumberman's cruel kid Alistair Gordon, and their ilk teasing and tormenting Ruby's hobbled leg. No, I'd be mad at you, but you wouldn't lose me, Thaddeus Forge. She narrowed her green eyes and turned his chin to look at her with a glaring stare. You would lose your soul, and that I won't abide. Sobbing and heaving right now, I must pause a moment, recalling in disgust this horrific tragedy. Even now, as I wipe my guilty tears, I'm remembering how Thad and Ruby must have loved each other beyond time. And these mere words, I bite my fist, torturing myself for my transgressions to both of them. Lord, help me to forgive myself for failing them. The day I hearken back to was just like any other day in beautiful Pearl Ridge. It was a blue sky day when Thad and his future bride walked toward the dusty market. They were headed to grab their monthly groceries of flour and molasses. It was the same day where I saw red storms brewing in the eyes of the vicious Alistair Gordon. That depraved degenerate had a hard-on for Thad from the day the boy had been born. As Thad smiled on with Ruby, you could hear the envious outrage boiling from Alistair. You could feel the glaring heat of his fury as the man studied and gritted his teeth watching, as a predator does. Like a rattlesnake, he never blinked, watching the loving sight of Thad and Ruby holding hands and casting smiling glances. The kind of stares of love seen in all young couples about to get hitched. Then I saw another fire brewing in Alistair's eyes that caused my stomach to knot. I caught the dark light that I'd seen before in Alistair's bloodshot eyes. I watched him licking his lustful lips, planning something I wanted no part of. When he spoke, all of us got the shudders. There had been talk, you see. Talk of girls not faring well around Alistair. So, when he clicked his tongue and pointed,
Gimp's been a little too uppity with her marriage coming to the beanpole. Maybe she should get knocked down a leg or two.
We all laughed at his jest, but I knew then no good was coming from Alistair's promise. No one in the town really knew the demons hounding that scoundrel. No one knew, not even Alistair's father, that the boy had perpetuated all manner of evil, from beatings to rape and even sadistic torture on some of the local girls. And the only reason I had a clue was from his drunken bragging and boasting. But on the one murder he mentioned, I got warned I'd be the next if that one got out. Like I said, I have always been a coward. It's my fault. I was a spineless chump back then. I ran for the hills when Alistair's demons rose up to strike like the serpent in the good book. I could have told Alistair's father. I could have warned Thad and Ruby to leave town. But I stuck hands in my yellow pockets and looked away, minding my own business. I turned a blind eye and a deaf ear and let the tragedy befall both. Back so long ago, I remember the flashes of blinding lightning that night on Cauldron Mountain. I recall hearing the guttural roars of a wounded animal. Then, as I walked with my lantern extinguished by the rain, I heard the whimpering sobs of anguish in the darkness outside of Devil's Cavern. I caught a glimpse of a silhouette illuminated by a red glow within the cavern. Shaking and fumbling with fear, I stumbled forward to the calamity. I kept my Sharp's rifle drawn. I almost dropped my gun and ran. As Devil's Cavern erupted with a fiery crimson glow, I recoiled in terror, witnessing a madman singing on both knees. The lightning flashed again overhead, giving me a second moment's glance of this most dreadful sight. I heard and could feel thunder erupt, shaking the very ground. I stood shuddering on my knees. Sheets of rain blanketed my eyes and soaked the pathetic figure before me. Kneeling just feet in front of me, oblivious to my presence, the maniac, bathed in blood, let out a second inhuman scream. I gripped my hands tightly a lot these days and open my Bible. I say my prayers out loud as the lightning crashes again across Hell's Forge. Gasping for air and trying to work my sandpaper dry tongue I feel the hot sweat pouring as I pray. Thaddeus Forge won't come for me tonight. If he does, I pray God steadies my hand and allows me to kill myself. Better to risk fire and damnation and the Lord's scorn than what Thaddeus Forge has planned for me. I'd rather be dead in hell than be condemned to a living one. The lightning crashes outside my door, just as it did so long ago. There's the silhouette of a scarecrow just out past that knotty pine by the hogs. He's here. My heart is racing chaotically, and my face and hands are numb. My chest is tightening, and sweat is dripping on my Bible as I pray. Dear Lord, protect your humble servant. Guide this evil back into its abyss. Thank you for listening. Have a great night.